Hey, this is the man from Modesto. I want to review an interesting principle from the Bible, and I want to talk about how I experienced something similar a few days ago. Now, in the Bible, it's 2 Kings chapter 13. Elisha goes to the king and he says, take this bow and shoot this arrow out the window. And the king, pulls back the bow and shoots the arrow out the window. And Elisha declares, just like this, you will defeat the enemy army of Aram. There will be a battle at Aphek, and you are going to beat them. He says, now and strike the ground. And the king strikes the ground 3 times. And Elisha becomes mad. He says, why did you only strike the ground 3 times? You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, and you would have completely destroyed the army. But now you will only defeat them 3 times. So there's this kind of an idea that something which seems like an insignificant action, shooting an arrow out a window, stomping on the ground, that these somehow will have an effect on a future event. It's also important to note that this is the king of Israel, and so he has authority over this army. So now, in fact, I'm just saying this and I'm realizing something I should have thought about last Saturday. I walked out of a grocery store and suddenly I saw, just in my mind, I was walking down the street somewhere and I saw in my mind a picture of an arm kind of like this, and there was a story about the arm is broken and maybe this finger is broken, and I thought, well, what is that? But I've been around long enough to know that sometimes when a spiritual battle and a spiritual attack is taking place, somehow your spirit perceives it and your mind translates it into a bit of a picture. In fact, I've been thinking about how to explain that, and that's the best explanation I've had so far. That works very nicely. So the spiritual attack takes place and your spirit perceives it, and sometimes, and this is something else I've noticed, my mind, like creating a dream or translating a dream message, is trying to create a picture equivalent of what it understands. And so I see this picture of the arm, and so I should have prayed, I should have got into it. Holy Spirit, what is this? What am I seeing? Like the prophets of old, they were much wiser apparently, and they would say, what am I seeing? Explain this to me. But I looked at it and I said, no, I declare no broken finger. There will be no broken finger, and there will be nothing. And I should have, struck the ground 5 or 6 times, but I made these 2-3 sentences, I bind it up, and I went on. Now, the next day, Sunday, my wife was riding, she and her brother, on the little local Marshootka bus, and the driver, to avoid an accident that happened right in front of their bus, slammed on the brakes and threw her to the ground. And she hurt her arm, and she was convinced it was broken and that she had broken her finger, exactly as I had seen in this dream. And she called me and told me, she said, I'm going to the hospital, you come and meet me. So I told her, I said, no, I fought this battle yesterday and nothing is broken, don't worry about that. So we went to the hospital and they took an x-ray and they said, well, it's broken. And my wife said, no, I need this arm, I have a lot of things to do and I'm not going to receive this cast. And she said, we will pray. So she and I prayed some more. I said, it's not broken, right? And just looking at it, it wasn't swollen like a broken arm. I've had, when I was young, I was very rough and I broke a lot of stuff, and it just didn't look broken at all. And she could close her hand and it just seemed like, it should be all right. So we prayed for the morning and the afternoon, and then in the later afternoon we went to a different hospital and another doctor came out. I liked him instantly when he walked into the room, and he knew where to poke, does this hurt, does this hurt? And that reminded me of the American doctors I'd seen before, and I felt really good about it. And he said, no, nothing is broken here. And so that was the case, but I should have said, no kind of injury at all will happen. I should have stood up until I felt something break. Just like this king, he should have stomped on the ground. A much smaller event, in my case, right? But my wife is under my authority. I'm her husband. So I should have realized, hey, why am I seeing this dream? It's either me or someone close to me. This should have been one of the first things that came to my mind out of wisdom, and I should have prayed much harder. I should have looked into it some more, and I didn't. So these are the kind of things that happen. Spiritual attacks happen. The enemy attacks But God never lets God always, He promises that there's always a way out, and He gives us power. He gives us authority. You've heard of the gospel of salvation a lot. People love to preach it. It's important. But there's also the gospel of the kingdom, the gospel of the power of God to defeat the enemy. And there are other things that are going on. We don't understand them all, but occasionally we touch them, we experience them, and we don't really talk about them. And that's why I want to, just as a brother, just come out and say, hey, this is the kind of thing I experience, and this is part of my walk with God. And this is part of the way that being a son of God, knowing our Father in heaven and understanding that the Holy Spirit is always there and provides for us and that God watches over us, that this is one of the kinds of things that I experience. And not just this weekend, but many, many times, well, at least hundreds of times. I've seen things like this and confronted them. And the enemy is a liar and he's out to get us, but we have weapons. We have a whole cache of different weapons and tools and kinds of wisdoms and understandings and gifts that God gives us, and community and one another to affirm and to encourage. So this is a man from Modesto reminding you as always to pray or be defeated.